I saw my daughter-in-law with my daughter's fiancé just before the wedding. I was going to confront them, but my son stopped me. He whispered to me, "Mom, I know." And what I discovered is even worse than you can imagine. But before we continue, check if you've subscribed to the channel and share in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know how far our stories of revenge go. I woke up while the sky over Oaxaca was still shrouded in darkness. It was barely 5 a.m. I put on a thin sweater, tied a scarf around my hair, and left my small house. The cool dawn air woke me up, but my heart was warm because I knew I was headed to the market, the place where all the flavors of my cooking are born. For 40 years, I haven't missed a single morning there. It's not just a habit, it's a part of me. When I returned to Mama Inés' kitchen, the small restaurant to which I've dedicated my entire life, the sun was barely rising. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and there was Dario, my oldest son, already standing, carefully inspecting each dried chili. We looked at each other. A faint nod was enough without the need for words. Dario is my right-hand man, the only one I trust to guard the soul of Mole del Sol, the dish that made me famous, what people call the culinary legend of Oaxaca. A little later, Patricia, my daughter-in-law, entered, always impeccable, with her hair pulled back in a perfect bun and a shiny tablet in her hand. "Mom Inés, this morning we have 10 tables reserved," she said with her eyes fixed on the screen. "And the shipment of cocoa will arrive before noon." I nodded with a smile. Patricia is the one who keeps everything in order, from reservations to deliveries. She is an essential part of the restaurant and it always fills me with pride to think that Dario chose a wife like her. Then the door flew open and Vanessa, my youngest daughter, burst in like a whirlwind. Mom. Yesterday's Instagram post already has over 1,000 likes." She showed her phone, her eyes shining, her face illuminated with joy. "Vanessa is in charge of the restaurant's marketing and I have to admit, she does it better than any of us." Comments praising my mole appeared on the screen. Each word was a reminder that all my years of cooking had paid off. I stroked her hair, my heart full. "You did very well, Vanessa," I said. And she smiled. A smile as radiant as the Oaxacan sun. With Vanessa came Adia, her fiancé. He entered elegantly, wearing a perfectly ironed shirt and a warm smile. "Mom," he said, opening his arms to give me a light hug. The scent of his cologne mingled with the aromas of the spices in the kitchen, creating something both foreign and familiar. "The restaurant smells incredible today," he said admiringly. "This mole is amazing. You should consider taking it to Mexico City or even franchising it. It has great potential." I laughed and shook my head. "Adia, this mole belongs in Oaxaca, in this home. It doesn't need to go anywhere else." He smiled without responding, but I saw a glint in his eye. By noon, the restaurant was packed. From the kitchen, I watched everything that was happening through the small window, as if it were a perfectly orchestrated symphony. Dario, in the middle of the cooks, calmly directed, moving his hands deftly to adjust the heat and spices. Patricia moved between the tables, her charming smile and kind voice ensuring that everything came out perfect. In one corner, Vanessa and Adia were sitting together. She happily showed him the newly printed wedding invitations. I saw her excitedly point to the gold letters while he tenderly took her hand. As I looked at them, I felt my heart fill with warmth, my family, my restaurant, everything was full of love and hope. As dusk fell, the restaurant began to empty out. The last customer left, leaving behind the usual calm. My entire family gathered around the old wooden table in the corner of the room. Dario uncorked a bottle of top-quality mezcal. The strong aroma of the liquor filled the air. Vanessa, radiant as the sun, stood up abruptly. Mom, brothers, I've already chosen the mariachi band for the wedding, she announced proudly. They're going to play Cielito Lindo, just the way you like it, Mom. I smiled, my eyes burning with excitement as I remembered my own wedding. Now it was my daughter's turn to start her own journey. Adia stood up and raised her glass. He looked me straight in the eyes and said in a deep voice, "Here's to Mama Inés, the woman who created the most delicious dish in Mexico, and to the woman who gave life to Vanessa, the most wonderful woman in my life." We all raised our glasses and shouted, "Cheers." Laughter filled the room, mingling with the clinking of glasses. I looked around to see my children laughing together, and in that moment I felt like I was the luckiest woman in the world. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I suddenly remembered my little notebook, the one where I wrote down everything from the mole recipe to the phone numbers of the suppliers. In it was the number of Doña Teresa, the woman who lived in the mountains, the only one who supplied the special wild herb that gave me its unique flavor, Mole del Sol. I had to call her tomorrow to confirm the order, otherwise the restaurant would run out of ingredients by the weekend. I searched the room, my heart racing as I realized I had left it in the drawer of my desk, in the restaurant. I glanced at the clock, almost midnight. Oaxaca was enveloped in silence. Part of me wanted to wait until the next morning, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep without retrieving that notebook. I put on my old coat, grabbed my car keys, and drove through the empty streets. I stopped in front of the back door to Mama Inés's kitchen, relieved to see that it was still locked. I opened it and stepped inside. The hinges creaked in the stillness. Inside, all was dark. The only sound was the hum of the freezer in the kitchen. The familiar scent of spices made me smile, but as I approached the small office at the end of the hallway, a faint thread of light escaped through the crack in the door, making me pause. My heart was pounding, but I immediately thought of Patricia. Perhaps she had stayed up late working, reviewing the accounts as she usually did. Patricia was always meticulous, sometimes staying up longer than I did. However, when I took a silent step toward the door, ready to when I called out, a sound froze me. A soft, knowing chuckle echoed in the air. It was Patricia's voice. Then, a deep male voice answered, but it wasn't Dario's. I recognized it instantly, it was Adia's. I pressed myself against the old wooden door, whose loose hinge left a small gap. Through it, I saw a scene that broke my heart. Adia was very close to Patricia, her hand on her waist, pulling her towards her. They were kissing, not a fleeting kiss, but a long, intense one, full of passion. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. Everything was spinning around me. My mind went blank. On my desk, the laptop screen shone, showing a graphic with a large title. Golden Sun, Business Plan. I squinted my eyes trying to read better, but their voices brought me back to reality. "Are you sure?" Patricia whispered, her voice trembling, but not from fear, but from excitement. "The wedding is only a week away." Adia smiled slightly, her tone serious and confident. "That's why we have to hurry. If we get the final recipe, you'll cancel the wedding and I'll get a divorce. Everything will be perfect. With your reputation and her recipe, we'll be the kings of gastronomy." I felt my blood run cold. Patricia hesitated. "It seems that Dario is starting to get suspicious. Yesterday he asked me why I was looking at his notebook." Adia laughed, a cold sound that went over my skin. "Say it was to update the menu. He's so stupid that he'll believe it." I squeezed my hand tightly, my nails digging into my palm. Anger flared up in me, but it was soon drowned out by pain. "Vanessa, what will happen to the girl when she finds out that her fiancé is betraying her? And Dario, how can I look him in the eye if the woman he loves is plotting to destroy everything?" Just then, a gentle but firm hand rested on my shoulder. I flinched. I almost screamed, but when I turned my head I saw Dario. His face in the dim light looked terrifying, not because of anger, but because of coldness. His eyes, which were normally warm like a kitchen fire, now shone with another cold, resolute flame. I opened my mouth to say something, but he shook his head. He put a finger to his lips, indicating silence. Tears welled up and blurred my vision. I wanted to lunge forward, grab Patricia and Adia, and beat the crap out of them, but Dario held me tight, preventing me from moving. He was stronger than I thought, not just physically, but in his self-control. Then he pulled out his phone, the screen on low. He stepped back into a more hidden corner. Carefully he aimed the camera through the crack in the door. A small red light on the phone blinked. It was recording. I stood there, my heart beating 1,000 times an hour. Each second seemed like an eternity. After about a minute, Dario turned off the phone and he put it away. He took my hand, not to comfort me, but to lead me out of there. I let him lead me. We crossed the kitchen. We went out the back door to a small patio with an old fountain. In the dim moonlight, I could see Dario's face clearly. He was no longer the quiet boy I had raised. There was a fire in his eyes that I had never seen before. Not just anger, but a burning determination. Dario drove home in silence. I stared out the window the entire way, but all I saw was lights blurred by tears. His hand was pressed tightly on my thigh, his knuckles white. When we arrived, Dario did not turn on the living room light. He led me straight to the kitchen, the place where for years I had taught him to measure each spoonful, where we would laugh over pots of aromatic mole. He put the phone on the wooden table and played the video he had just recorded. I did not want to watch it again, but my eyes would not tear themselves away from the screen. The scene was clear, raw, and irrefutable. I hit the table hard. The blow made the glasses on the shelf vibrate. I roared, my voice cracking with rage. I'll call Vanessa right now. I'll call Patricia's father. I'll go see Adia and I'll unmask him. Dario took my hand. His gaze was cold, but full of determination. Mom, stop, he said in a serious but firm voice. We can't act on impulse. They'll deny everything, and Vanessa will get hurt before we have any clear evidence. I looked at him, my chest tight with pain. I started to suspect 3 weeks ago, Dario began to say in a slow voice, as if holding back his rage. Patricia left her cell phone in the kitchen. The screen lit up with a message from Adia. Our sun is about to rise. I can't wait any longer, my love. I didn't want to believe it, but from that moment on I started watching. She said that the following week she lied, saying she was going to Puebla to buy a rare type of chili, but in reality she stayed in Oaxaca. She had secretly installed a micro camera disguised as an old towel hook near the spice rack, from where she had a perfect view of her work table, where she kept her recipe notebook. Mom, I wanted to be sure, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't want to believe that the woman I love was capable of that. He opened his phone and showed me the videos saved in a hidden folder. I sank into my chair, feeling like the floor was opening up beneath my feet. One video showed Patricia, believing no one was watching, taking out her phone to photograph every page of Dario's recipe book with a cold, unwavering gaze. In another video, Adia appeared one afternoon when there were no customers and went into the warehouse with Patricia. They whispered about renting a new location, about investors in Mexico City, about a culinary empire they would build together. I held my head in my hands, and tears fell heavily onto the table. My legacy, everything my family and I had worked for generations, reduced to loot to be stolen. Vanessa's love, Dario's trust, all trampled mercilessly. Dario poured me a glass of water, set it in front of me, and sat down. His gaze was cold, but his voice was firm. Do you want the recipe, Mom? He said. We'll give you the recipe. I looked at him, confused. What do you say? Dario smiled, a smile without mirth, full of cunning. Let's create another version. A trap. I blinked, trying to understand it. Dario stood up and took an empty leather notebook identical to his from the shelf. Mom, we're going to rewrite the recipe, but not the real one. We're going to make them think they have everything when in reality they'll be holding a time bomb. That night the kitchen became our battlefield. I sat at the table remembering each step of the recipe while Dario wrote carefully. We kept 90% of the original, enough to fool anyone who didn't know Mole well. But the other 10% were subtle, lethal changes. I told Dario to replace the black chiluacal pepper, that rare pepper that gives the deep, smoky flavor typical of Oaxaca, with pasilla pepper, toasted a little more. An inexperienced palate wouldn't notice it right away, but that bitterness at the back of the throat would give them away. We reduced the almonds, increased the seeds, destroying the silky texture of the sauce and the final punch. I changed the sweet and fragrant Ceylon cinnamon for cassia cinnamon, cheaper and harsher, enough to disrupt the perfect balance of more than 30 ingredients. We worked in silence. The only sound was the touch of the pencil on the paper and the rhythmic breathing of both. Each line was a hammer blow, each change, a sentence for the traitors. The next morning, when the sun was barely rising, I entered the restaurant trying to appear calm, as if nothing had happened. The door creaked open and I immediately saw Patricia smiling as always. "Good morning, Mother," she said in a sweet voice. "Too sweet." I nodded, forcing a smile, clenching my fists to keep from shaking with rage. The morning staff meeting proceeded as usual. I stood in the corner of the kitchen, watching everyone. Patricia, her shiny tablet in hand, proposed a group discount campaign to boost sales. "What do you think, Mother?" she asked, her eyes shining as if she expected a standing ovation. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Good idea, Patricia," I said with a calmness that surprised even me. "Do it." Dario, beside me, silently arranged the silverware on the table without saying a word. Only I noticed that he was gripping my hand tighter than usual, his gaze fleetingly cold. At noon, when the restaurant was starting to fill up, my phone vibrated. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen and I felt a knot in my chest. I walked quickly to the cold room, where the constant hum of the motor muffled the noise outside. "Mom." Vanessa's voice trembled on the other end of the line. "Adia just canceled the appointment to taste the wedding cake this afternoon. She says she has an urgent meeting that she can't postpone." I leaned against the metal door, trying to keep my voice calm. "Don't worry, my dear," I replied, each word weighing on my chest. Adia's job is important and men are usually tense before getting married. "Everything will be fine." Sweet lies, but bitter as she said them. I heard Vanessa sigh. Her voice sounded tiny. "I just want him to be as excited as I am, or Mom." I closed my eyes, feeling the hot tears welling up. I wanted to tell him the whole truth, to ask him to run away from Adia, but I knew it wasn't time yet. I went back to the kitchen, trying to concentrate. Dario was at his workstation in front of the fake recipe notebook we had prepared the night before. He pretended to write with interest, but his eyes were discreetly watching the others. At that moment, his phone rang. A planned call with a friend. "What?" he exclaimed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The shipment of tomatoes is being held up at the checkpoint. I'm on my way there." He frowned in feigned concern and turned to Patricia, who was checking a tray of ingredients. "I have to go out for a moment," he said calmly. "Watch the kitchen for me." "Yes." He left the notebook open right on the most important page, the one with the proportions of the peppers, and left, not without first glancing at me from the corner of his eye. I gave her a small nod, my heart pounding. I watched from my office through the small window with bated breath. Patricia looked around, making sure the other cooks were busy with the bubbling pots. Then she walked over to Dario's station. I watched as she pulled out her phone, her fingers quickly sliding across the screen. The click of a photo was faint but sharp. She flipped through a few more pages, snapping several photos with a cold, calculating gaze. I gripped the edge of the desk, my nails digging into the wood. When a waiter entered the kitchen, Patricia quickly put the phone away and resumed her professional expression as if nothing had happened. At the end of the day, as the sunset gilded Oaxaca, Vanessa arrived at the restaurant. Her eyes were puffy as if she had cried for hours. She was carrying a box of freshly printed wedding invitations, gleaming with gold lettering that bore her name and Adia's. She sat at her usual table, stroking one of the cards with trembling fingers tracing the words. Quote, "Mom," she murmured almost without a voice, "I feel like he's lost his enthusiasm. Yesterday he said he was busy, today he canceled again. I don't know what I did wrong." I sat down next to her, hugging her, feeling her small body tremble in my arms. I stroked her hair, trying to keep my voice soft. "It's not your fault, Vanessa," I told her. "Sometimes men need time to prepare for a big step. Everything will be okay." But inside me, a hurricane was raging. On Thursday night, just 2 days before Vanessa's wedding, I sat in the small living room of our house, carefully arranging the family tablecloths. Suddenly, the door flew open, so loudly it made me jump. Vanessa rushed in, her face pale and her eyes red with tears. She couldn't say a word, just showed me her phone with a shaking hand. I stared at the screen and felt my heart stop. A short message from Adia appeared. "I'm sorry, Vanessa. I can't marry you. Let's cancel the whole thing." Vanessa fell to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "Why, Mom? Why?" she screamed between her tears. "What did I do wrong?" I asked her, but she didn't answer. I knelt down and hugged her tightly. Her tears soaked my blouse and I couldn't find the words to comfort her. Anything I could say would be useless in the face of the pain that was tearing my daughter's heart apart. I could only hold her, stroke her hair and let her cry until her tears faded. At that moment, the door opened again. Dario entered with an eerily serene expression. In his hands he carried a sheaf of papers, white sheets that seemed cold when they reflected the light. He didn't look at Vanessa, only at me, and his deep voice resonated like a sharp blow. "Patricia gave me this. It's the divorce petition, the reason, irreconcilable differences." I felt the air disappear from the room. 2 blows, 2 broken hearts. At the same time, Vanessa looked up, her swollen eyes staring at her brother without understanding what was happening. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my skin to keep from breaking down. Dario knelt down next to Vanessa and he gently took the phone from her hands. Vanessa said in a firm and calm voice, "You did nothing wrong. You are the victim of a miserable farce." She looked at him with tearful eyes, begging for an explanation. Dario looked at me seeking my approval and I nodded. It was time for my daughter to know the truth. I sat down next to her, took her hand and felt the coldness of her fingers. Dario began to tell her about his first suspicions when he saw Adia's messages on Patricia's phone to the hidden camera he had installed in the kitchen, and finally the scene we had both witnessed the night before. I intervened when he stopped, his voice shaking as he remembered the moment Adia and Patricia hugged each other talking about their plan to steal the recipe and destroy our family. Dario opened his phone and showed her the video he had recorded. I saw Vanessa freeze with her eyes wide open. The image on the screen was like a final blow. Adia and Patricia, their kiss and the poisoned words about canceling the wedding, getting a divorce and taking over the recipe for Mole del Sol. Vanessa already she didn't cry. The tears stopped flowing, and in their place reigned a terrifying silence. Then, like a flame ignited, she leapt to her feet and wiped her tears with her sleeve. "They dared do this to our family?" she said in a cold voice, without a trace of weakness. Her eyes burned with fury, and in that instant, I understood that Vanessa was no longer the naive girl who dreamed of a wedding. She had become a part of us, the ones who were willing to fight to protect our family. That night, the three of us didn't sleep. We sat in the kitchen, not to cook, but to strategize. The warm yellow light no longer provided comfort. It was a reminder that we were entering a battle. Vanessa pulled out her laptop, her fingers typing rapidly. "We're not going to let them win," she said in a firm voice. "I'm going to use social media. I'm going to use what I built for the restaurant to expose them." She began to outline a communications plan, proposing to publish content that would appeal to the affection of the people of Oaxaca for the legacy of Mama Inés's cooking. Dario, sitting across from her, began to analyze the flaws in Patricia's cooking that he had observed. "She's always in a hurry," he said in a serious voice. "She never tastes the sauce long enough. She doesn't take care to balance the seasonings. And Adia, he only says nice words, but he doesn't understand the soul of mole." I listened with a feeling of pride mixed with pain. My two sons, although deeply hurt, kept their cool to plan. The next morning, before the sun had dispelled the fog, a terrible crash woke the entire neighborhood. I was in the kitchen making a strong coffee to regain strength after the long sleepless night, when the hammer blows and the roar of the machine startled me. I ran to the bedroom window, pulled the curtains, and the scene took my breath away. In front of Mama Inés's kitchen, where Mrs. Rose's old ceramics shop used to be, there was now a construction site in full swing. A large truck was unloading new signs and gleaming. Workers in yellow uniforms moved quickly, tearing down the old wall, as if they wanted to erase the memory of the place. And in the middle of it all, with her hands on her hips and an arrogant face, was Adia. Next to her, Patricia, wearing a designer coat and a stack of blueprints in her hand, directed the workers with cool confidence. The people from the neighborhood began to gather, murmuring. I saw their curious and compassionate glances turn from my restaurant to the construction site. Mrs. Consuelo, the flower vendor on the corner, shook her head and whispered to a neighbor. "How dare they do this to Mamaines?" Dario and Vanessa appeared next to me. They both froze when they saw the scene. A huge tarp had been stretched out, hiding the construction site. On it, a logo with a stylized sun, yellow and dazzling in the morning light, in large letters. Golden Sun, the essence of Mexican mole. Opening soon. Vanessa squeezed my hands so hard that her nails dug into my skin, but no, I felt pain. Dario took a deep breath and walked out of the restaurant, walking straight toward Patricia, who was standing next to Adia. "What's going on, Patricia?" she asked in an alarmed voice. Patricia turned and smiled icily. "Oh, Dario," she said mockingly. "You're still so naive. It's too late. Thank you for being careless. I already have your recipe book. Good luck to your family." Her words were like a sharp stab, but I saw the corner of Dario's lips lift slightly. A discreet smile that only I understood. That book, that recipe, was the trap we had set. At that moment, listening to Patricia, I no longer felt anger. Instead, a flame of determination ignited in me. It was time to act. I turned toward the kitchen. I grabbed my spotless white apron, a symbol of myself and of Mama Inés cooking, and put it on. Every stitch of that apron reminded me of the years I had sweated in that kitchen, of the previous generations who had passed on to me their love for gastronomy. Oaxacan. I left the restaurant with Dario and Vanessa right behind me. When I emerged onto the small street, all noise stopped. The workers stopped working. The people stopped murmuring. All eyes were on me. Adia and Patricia turned. For a moment their faces showed surprise, but then they quickly turned to defiance. I didn't look at Patricia. I couldn't stand her fake gaze. Instead, I fixed my eyes on Dia. The same eyes that days before had called me, Mama, with feigned tenderness. In a loud, clear voice that echoed throughout the street, I spoke. Adia Castillo, you sat at my table, you called me mother, you praised my family's legacy, you raised your glass to the mole that my children and I prepared with our hearts. I pointed toward my restaurant, where the warm light from the windows still shone, and then toward the garish sign with the golden sun. Oaxaca doesn't have room for two suns, much less for a fake one created from lies. The crowd fell silent as if holding its breath. I took a deep breath, feeling the strength of years of work, the love of my family, the pride of being an Oaxacan woman. I, Inés Morales, challenge you to a contest right here in the Zocalo Square. 2 restaurants, 1 mole. The diners will be the judges. Whoever loses will have to close their restaurant in Oaxaca forever. The silence was absolute, as if the entire street was waiting. Then the murmurs began, spreading like waves. Adia looked at me and let out an arrogant laugh, full of confidence. Are you sure, Inés? She said mockingly. You're going to lose. Your recipe is mine now. I smiled, not out of joy, but because I knew she had fallen into my trap. Are you afraid? I answered her firmly. The crowd murmured louder, and I saw a flash of rage in Adia's eyes. She was provoked, and her overconfidence in a stolen recipe was making her lower her guard. Okay, she shouted, I accept. I will draw up a legal contract so you don't back out. He turned to Patricia and ordered, call our lawyer. I didn't respond. I turned and walked back into the restaurant with Dario and Vanessa following me. As the door closed, I heard the excited murmurs of the town. The battle had begun. That same afternoon, a well-dressed man, briefcase in hand, entered the restaurant. It was Adia's lawyer, and he was carrying a thick contract. Adia and Patricia stood with him by the door, arms crossed and a triumphant look on their faces. Mrs. Inés, the lawyer said in a polite but cold tone. Here's the contract for the competition in the Zocalo Square. I hope you've thought it through. I took the document and scanned the numerous clauses. One in particular caught my eye. The restaurant that received the fewest votes from the 500 randomly selected diners would have to stop selling mole and close down forever within 24 hours. I looked up. Adia smiled smugly while Patricia avoided looking at me. I reached the last page, picked up the pen, and signed. Inés Morales, firm contract. I'm ready, I said in a calm but cutting voice. Adia let out a laugh, convinced of her victory. You're going to regret it, Mom Inés, she said, emphasizing the word mom mockingly. I didn't answer. I just turned around and went into the kitchen, feeling the gaze of Dario and Vanessa behind me like a source of silent strength. The following days were a mad dash, as if all of Oaxaca had been divided into 2 camps. Across the street, the construction site of Sol Dorado was working day and night. The bright lights and the constant roar of the machines wouldn't let me sleep. In just 1 week, a modern restaurant with a gleaming glass facade and a gold neon sign that seemed to want to dim the light in Mom Inés' kitchen. Adia took advantage of his fame and appeared in all the local newspapers and on television with grandiloquent words about the gastronomic revolution. We are going to bring mole to the new generations, he declared in an interview with a voice full of pride. I saw him in front of the cameras wearing a white chef's jacket embroidered with the Golden Sun logo and a confident smile. Patricia was in charge of the operation. Through the window I saw her interviewing young chefs who had graduated from prestigious culinary schools, hiring waiters in elegant uniforms. I heard that they had imported a system of industrial mills from Germany to optimize the mole process. Everything was shiny, but I knew that behind that shine something was missing, the soul. In the meantime, Mama Inés's kitchen was closed. We hung a simple sign on the door. Temporarily closed to prepare a special event. Meet me at the Zocalo inside. The atmosphere was quiet, but full of tension, like before a big storm. Vanessa became the commander of the media front. She didn't directly attack Soldorado, but chose instead to touch the hearts of the people of Oaxaca. We're going to tell the story of our family, she said, her eyes alight in front of her laptop. She posted old black and white photos. My grandparents by the clay stove, me as a young man with long hair and cocoa-stained hands, and Dario as a child smiling in front of a bowl of mole. Each post was a piece of memory, a story about 4 generations who had put sweat and love into that dish. This isn't just food, Vanessa wrote. This is the heart of Oaxaca. I watched her work with pride and a lump in my chest. Just days before, I had cried inconsolably for Adia, but now she rose stronger than I could have ever imagined. Dario became the guardian of the dish's soul. He spent 2 full days selecting the chilies one by one, examining each fruit under the light to make sure there was not a single crack. He toasted the seeds with his own hands in his grandfather's old cast-iron skillet that he called the heart of the kitchen. Mom, he told me as we sat together in the kitchen, I don't just want to win, I want them to see that they will never be able to achieve what we have. Quote. His words brought tears to my eyes. In my son, I saw a flame not just of anger, but of a profound loyalty to our family and our legacy. He gathered the most loyal employees, Doña Consuelo, who had been making tortillas with magic hands for 20 years, Don Hector, who grilled meat with the precision of an artisan. I gave no orders, I just stood before them and said, with a broken voice, let's cook with our hearts, as we always have. They nodded, their eyes full of determination. One night, as I was tiredly reviewing the list of ingredients, Don Miguel, the farmer who supplied us with cheese, knocked on the door. He brought the freshest cheese and placed it in front of me. My entire town is with you, Inés, he said in a firm voice. You will not be able to defeat the soul of Oaxaca. I hugged him, tears streaming down my cheeks. That silent support was worth more than any advertising campaign. The night before the contest, our kitchen was still lit. The aroma of real mole del sol wafted through the air, mingling with cocoa, roasted chilies, and Ceylon cinnamon. I stood by the stove stirring the pot of sauce, feeling the heat rise to my face. Dario checked each batch of seeds while Vanessa prepared the white porcelain plates. We didn't talk much, but the synchronicity between the 3 of us was like a dance without music. On the day of the competition, the Zocalo Square was transformed into a giant gastronomic arena. The city government, seeing the attraction of the event, turned the place into a huge stage. 2 large kitchens were set up facing each other, and between them, hundreds of tables covered in white silk tablecloths awaited the 500 diners who would be the judges. Across the square, the Golden Sun stage shone like a spectacle. A huge LED screen projected the Golden Sun logo while the sound system pumped out vibrant rhythms. His team, in bright yellow uniforms, moved like a perfectly programmed machine. Adias stepped out in front in a crisp white chef's jacket embroidered with the Golden Sun logo in gold thread, looking like a rock star. He smiled confidently and waved to the crowd as if victory were already his. Patricia stood behind, coordinating the team with a cold but proud gaze. I watched them and felt anger rising in me again, but I reminded myself. Today, it won't be words, but flavor that will do the talking. Our setting, on the other hand, was simple, like our own kitchen. An old clay oven, the same old clay pots, and the 3 of us, me, Dario, and Vanessa, wearing simple white aprons. All around us were familiar faces. Doña Consuelo with her skillful hands making tortillas, and Don Hector with his calm gaze as he grilled the meat. They weren't just employees, they were family, people who had been with me for so many years. As I looked at them, I saw the determination shining in their eyes, and it warmed my heart. The contest began. The host, a well-known figure in Oaxaca, stepped onto the stage, his voice booming through the microphone. "Today we will witness a historic culinary battle," he announced, eliciting cheers from the audience. Adia was invited to speak first. He took the microphone without losing his confident smile. "Sal Dorado represents innovation," he said enthusiastically. "We will bring Oaxacan mole to the world, to new generations with a fresh vision." The audience applauded, but I could tell that the applause was superficial, more out of curiosity than real support. When it was my turn, I stepped onto the stage with trembling hands. I wasn't used to speaking in front of so many people, but I looked into the eyes of the Oaxacans, the familiar faces of the neighborhood, and I said, "My food will speak for itself, without embellishment, without exaggeration, just the truth from the heart." The audience fell silent for a second, then burst into warm, heartfelt applause. The camera pans through the two kitchens, capturing every moment. At Sal Dorado, everything runs like a production line. The young cooks move quickly, following Patricia's instructions. They measure ingredients with electronic scales that are precise to the nearest gram. The mole is served from a huge stainless steel pot, shiny, as if it had just come out of a factory. Each dish is presented perfectly, but as I look at them I notice that something is missing. Warmth. Everything in our kitchen is a dance. Dario and I understand each other without words. I taste the sauce. I adjust the cinnamon a little while he checks the fire, making sure the roasted chilies retain that deep smoky flavor. Vanessa, with her delicate hands, places each slice of tender turkey breast on the white porcelain plates. She bathes them in the thick, shiny mole and sprinkles a little toasted sesame seeds, perfuming the air. Each dish is a work of art, not only for its beauty, but because it contains love and memories of my family. The first plates of mole are brought to the jury, made up of ordinary people from Oaxaca, a teacher with round glasses, a taxi driver with a friendly smile, a clay artisan with rough hands and a few curious tourists. They are asked to try both dishes marked A and B to ensure impartiality and then cast their vote in a sealed ballot box. The tension is so great that I can hear my heart beating. The camera focuses on the faces of the judges. When they try the golden sun dish, many nod, looking satisfied. Their food is beautiful, the sauce shines and I know it tastes good, but only in appearance. When they try ours, their expressions change. A middle-aged man closes his eyes and smiles as if remembering something from the past. An old woman with white hair holds the spoon with trembling hands and whispers to the person next to her, "This tastes just like my mother's." I squeeze Vanessa's hand and feel her fingers grip mine as if we'll hold on to hope. Voting time is over. The ballot boxes are sealed and taken to the stage for the public count. Adia is standing next to her kitchen, displaying an electronic board ready to update the results on the LED screen. She looks at me with that confident smile that never fades. "You've done your best, Mom Inés," she says mockingly. "But today will be the day of golden sunshine." I don't answer, I just take Dario and Vanessa's hands. Dario stands tall with a steady gaze and Vanessa whispers, "Mom, we did everything we could." I nod, feeling the whole world holding its breath. We've done everything we can. Now it's time for the taste of truth to speak. The presenter steps up on stage with the final results in hand. The air in the Zocalo Square becomes thick. Thousands of people wait in silence. Adia's huge screen is ready to display the numbers. Ladies and gentlemen, the presenter announces in a voice that resonates through the speakers. After counting 500 votes, we finally have the result of the culinary duel of the century with 121 votes. The Sol Dorado restaurant. A few scattered rounds of applause can be heard from the onlookers, and I see Eddie standing up with an even wider smile of satisfaction and an overwhelming majority of 379 votes. The presenter continues, raising his voice. Today's winner is La Cocina de Mama Inés. The square erupts. The shouts and applause resound like thunder. Don Miguel hugs Doña Consuelo. They both laugh happily. Vanessa bursts into tears. Tears of joy stream down her face while Dario grabs my shoulder tightly, his eyes shining with pride. On the stage in front, Adia's smile froze. She murmured in a trembling voice. This can't be. Our recipe is perfect. This can't be happening. She turned to Patricia with eyes full of panic. There's a catch. I demand a recount of the votes. Patricia, her face pale, stood still, clutching her sketchbook as if clinging to her last hope. The crowd began to murmur and a few cries of disapproval rose towards them. I looked at Dario, then at Vanessa and nodded. It was time. Vanessa stepped forward with a small remote control in her hand and a steady gaze. She pressed the button and the huge LED screen behind Adia went dark, leaving the square in silence for a moment. Then, the screen came back on, but instead of the Sol Dorado logo, it showed a familiar scene. The dark hallway of Mama Inés' kitchen. Thousands of people held their breath as the video Dario had recorded that night began to play. The image showed Adia and Patricia kissing passionately. Whispers could be heard through the sound system. When we get the final recipe, you cancel the wedding and I get a divorce. With your fame and that old lady's recipe, we will be the kings of the kitchen. A gasp ran through the square, followed by furious boos. People pointed and looked at them with contempt. They stood there, frozen, their faces white, unable to say a word. Patricia trembled, covering her face with her hands as Adia looked at her in desperation, searching for someone to blame. When the video ended, I stepped up on stage and took the microphone from the presenter. The crowd fell silent in expectation. I looked down and saw the familiar faces of Oaxaca, people who had tried my mole, who had shared my family's story. I took a deep breath and spoke in a calm but firm voice. Adia Castillo is right. Her mole is very similar to the original recipe. It just looks a bit like it. I turned my head and looked him straight in the eyes. I saw him flinch under my gaze, because the recipe they stole from my son was a trap that he and I had prepared together. The crowd began to murmur in surprise. I explained about the fake notebook. How we had subtly changed the most important ingredients. Toasted pasilla chili instead of black chilhuacal. Cinnamon almost cheaply instead of Ceylon. And fewer almonds to lose the texture. You can copy the ingredients, I said firmly, but you can never copy the soul. Their mole lacks that deep, smoky flavor, the perfect smoothness, and leaves a bitter taste in your throat. That's the taste of betrayal. I looked at Patricia, who lowered her head, her shoulders shaking. Then I looked at Adia, that man who once called me mom with a fake smile. You stole a recipe, but you threw away something much more valuable. Trust, love, and honor. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Some chanted, Mama Inés, Mama Inés. I saw Mr. Miguel raise his fist, Mrs. Consuelo wipe away her tears. Adia tried to stammer something, but the boos drowned her out. She looked around, seeing the cameras pointed at her face, the looks of contempt from the people of Oaxaca. Her empire, Sol Dorado, the one she boasted about so much, collapsed before it was born. Suddenly, a middle-aged man, elegantly dressed, emerged from the dining area. He raised his hand asking permission to speak. The host, sensing the moment, he passed the microphone to her. The square fell silent. All eyes turned to the stranger. "My name is Carlos," he began in a deep, clear voice that echoed through the speakers. "I'm an architect. I come from Mexico City. I came to Oaxaca because I heard about this contest online. I don't know anyone here. I don't have any favorites. I'm just a diner, a food lover." He paused, looking toward the Sol Dorado stage, where Adia and Patricia remained transfixed. Quote, "Your dish is very good," he said sincerely. "It's well presented, with a strong flavor. I was going to vote for it." Then he turned to me with a look so sincere that it moved me. "But then I tried the one from Mama Inés's kitchen. Señora Inés, your food is not just food. When I tasted it, I felt like my grandmother again. I saw her cooking, smelled the burning wood, the taste of time and the warmth of home. Her dish has soul. The other one, though perfect in technique, is empty." Mr. Carlos's words fell like the final blow to Sol Dorado. The crowd erupted in applause, not only for the victory, but for the deep empathy that hung in the air. I stood there with tears silently streaming down my cheeks. His words were not just an acknowledgement of the mole we had made, but an affirmation of everything my family had stood for, the love, the heritage, and the heart of Oaxaca. I looked toward Adia and Patricia. I saw them retreating backstage, trying to avoid the gazes of contempt and boos from the audience. Adia, in her impeccable white chef's uniform that had once been her pride, now walked with her head down, hurriedly. Patricia, with her hands covering her face, ran after her as if she wanted to escape the truth that they themselves had created. The contract was signed. The lawyer had been a witness. Her career in Oaxaca was over, just as stipulated by the cruel clause that they themselves had imposed on us with such confidence. I turned to look at my loved ones. Dario, for the first time in a long time, smiled calmly, without a trace of tension. Vanessa hugged Doña Consuelo and they both laughed through their tears. Don Hector, Don Miguel and the loyal employees who had been with me surrounded us with eyes full of pride. I opened my arms and we all hugged each other on stage amidst the endless applause of the audience. My tears fell again, but this time they were not tears of pain, they were tears of happiness, of liberation. We had not only won a cooking contest, we had won a battle for honor, for inheritance, and for love. I felt the warmth of Dario and Vanessa's arms, the hugs of Doña Consuelo, Don Hector, and also Don Miguel, who stood there smiling like a proud father. When the crowd began to disperse and the Zocalo Square regained its quiet familiarity, I led my children and my team back to Mama Inés's kitchen. The old wooden door creaked as I pushed it open and the aroma of spices greeted us like an old friend. I stood in the kitchen, observing every corner of the place that had been my whole life. The clay pots were still on their shelves, Don Dario's iron skillets still hung in the corner. Everything was the same, but I knew that we had changed. We were stronger, more united, and more grateful than ever. "Shall we reopen tomorrow, Mom?" Vanessa asked, her voice still shaky, but her eyes full of hope. I nodded, smiling. "Tomorrow and every day to come," I replied. Dario put his hand on my shoulder with a smile, with a steady gaze. "We will continue making mole as our grandparents did, as you have done." I took the hands of my two children, feeling the strength emanating from them. "And we will do it with all our hearts," I said with determination. That night I did not sleep. I stayed in the kitchen under the warm light of the lamp, holding the real recipe book, not the fake one we had used to fool Adia and Patricia. I turned the pages, reading the words handwritten by my mother, my grandmother, and me. Each recipe was a story, each line a memory. Dawn filtered through the kitchen window, bathing the wooden table in a golden light. I got up and put on my white apron and began preparing for the new day. The kitchen came alive again with the crackling of the fire and the aroma of chili and cocoa. I smiled, feeling my heart light, and whispered to myself, "Thank you, Oaxaca. Thank you for choosing us." I have lived through the darkest days of my life when trust was betrayed, when the effort of all my life was broken. A life seemed about to be taken away. But I understood that what keeps Mama Inés's kitchen alive is not the recipe or the fame, but the love for food, for family, and for this land. Life can be cruel, but it has its own justice. Those who live with greed end up tasting the bitter flavor, and those who remain kind and firm, in the end savor the sweetness of victory. That is why I want to tell all those who have been betrayed or underestimated, do not let others decide your worth. Truth, love, and integrity, even if hidden for a time, will always shine again. The story you just heard has changed names and places to protect the identities of the people involved. We do not tell it to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and reflect. How many mothers suffer in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face everything to recover your voice? I want to let me know your opinion. Because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Right now, on the final screen, I will leave two of the most beloved stories on the channel. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.